Hello? Actually, I wasn't planning on recording anything tonight. I'm somewhere in the middle of nowhere right now. There isn't much around me. Just mountains, trees, and the sound of the wind moving through them, and a little bit of music. There's no city lights, no traffic, no voices. It's just silence. I've been here for a few days now, and I haven't really spoken to anyone. I was sitting here a few minutes ago, looking at the sky, thinking about everything I've seen over the years, and the places I've been, the people I've met, the things I've lost, and a few things I've never really talked about to anyone. I don't know why I decided to record this. Actually, I wrote something down worth to be expressed, and I just felt like talking. So, whatever this recording eventually ends up, I suppose it doesn't really matter. Maybe this is just one of those nights that deserves to be remembered. The fire is almost gone, the wind is getting colder, and there's something about being this far away from everything that makes certain thoughts just impossible to ignore. So I'll just speak. No script, no particular destination, just whatever comes to mind. Maybe I'll talk about loneliness, maybe death, maybe science, maybe love, maybe the strange things I've encountered along the way. I don't know. Let's see where the night takes us. Yeah. There are places on Earth where silence becomes so complete that you begin to hear things you normally mistake for nothing. The wind moving through the trees, the distant movement of water, your own breathing, the quiet rhythm of your heartbeat, reminding you that despite everything, you're still here. I've spent a long time looking for those places, not because I hate the world. I simply wanted to know that what remained me when the world disappeared. I've slept beneath the skies without a single artificial light. I've walked through forests where the nearest human being was many kilometers away. I've watched the sea from cliffs until sunrise arrived without anyone knowing where I was. I've crossed cities and countries without speaking to a single person. I've sat alone on trains for hours, watching the landscapes disappear behind the glasses, wondering how many versions of myself had been left behind in all the places I had visited. Sometimes I think I've traveled so far that even my past has forgotten where I am. And perhaps that's the point. There's a particular freedom in becoming unknown. Nobody accepts anything from a person they cannot find. Nobody asks where you've been, nobody asks where you're going, and eventually, you stop asking yourself. I used to think traveling meant like discovering the world, seeing places. I was wrong. The world is only the mirror. You travel far enough, and eventually, you begin discovering yourself. And sometimes, you don't like what you find. I've always been fantasized by darkness. Not the darkness of night, it's the other kind. The kind that exists inside people. Every person carries a room inside themselves that nobody else can enter. Some people lock it permanently, some pretend it doesn't exist. Some spend their entire lives decorating the outside of the house so nobody notices what's happening inside. I've spent enough time alone to know what I have want to. I really have one, like the others. I don't think anyone is completely good. I don't think anyone is completely evil either. We're more complicated than that, as humans. We are contradictory creatures. We can love someone and still hurt them. We can want freedom and still become prisoners of our own habits. We can desire connection and simultaneously fear being truly known. And in my case, this is me. I don't want to be known. We can spend years searching for someone, only to discover that what we were really searching for was ourselves. That's the strange thing about people. We spend so much of our lives looking outward, at relationships, at money, at beauty, at success, at other people's lives, and almost never inward. Perhaps because the inside is harder to control. I've watched people fall in love in airports. I've watched strangers argue in restaurants. I've watched old couple walk slowly through unfamiliar cities, holding hands as if the entire world could disappear and they would still know where to find each other. I've also watched people sit beside someone they claim to love and look completely alone. That told me something. Loneliness isn't the absence of people. Sometimes loneliness is the absence of being understood. You can be surrounded by thousands and still feel like you're standing on the other side of a glass wall. Nobody can hear you, nobody can reach you. And the worst part is, you become very good at pretending you are fine. I've become familiar with solitude, too familiar perhaps. There are days when I don't speak, not because I have nothing to say. It's because silence became easier than explaining myself. When you spend enough time alone, you stop performing. There's nobody to impress, nobody to deceive, nobody to convince. You eat when you're hungry, sleep when you're tired, walk when you want to walk, stop when you want to stop, and eventually discover something uncomfortable. A large part of what we call personality is simply adaptation. We become different people depending on who is watching: the traveler, the lover, maybe the son, the friend, the stranger. Just remove everyone right now and ask yourself who remains. The person is difficult to meet. That person is super difficult to know, but I've met him. I've spent nights in mountains where the temperature dropped low enough to make every breath visible. I've watched storms arrive across the ocean. I've sat beneath trees older than any story I could tell. I've watched fog swallow the entire valley. And sometimes, standing there alone, I felt something I couldn't explain. It's not fear, it's not peace, something between the two. A reminder that the world existed long before I arrived. And it will continue long after I disappear. That realization can destroy your ego. And that's probably a good thing, because we're not as important as we think. The universe doesn't know our names. Stars explode without warning. Galaxies collide without asking permission. Planets disappear. Species vanish. Entire civilizations becomes completely dust. And yet, here we are, thinking, remembering, loving, fearing, dreaming. This small arrangement of matter on a small planet orbiting an ordinary star. And somehow, that matter become conscious enough to ask why it exists. Science is beautiful for that reason. The more we learn, the more certain we become. Or let me say, the less certain we become. At some cases. We know that the atoms inside our bodies were forged through ancient cosmic process. The iron in our blood did not originate here. The calcium in our bones has a history older than humanity. We are made from the remains of stars, literally. Which means that when you look into the night sky, you aren't looking at something completely separate from yourself. You're looking at your ancestry. The universe is looking back at itself through you. And perhaps consciousness is the strangest phenomenon of all. Matter become aware of matter. The universe became capable of asking questions about itself. And then Somehow, I ended up alone on a mountain thinking about it. There are things that I've experienced that I don't talk about, not because they are secrets, because some experiences lose their meaning when you try to explain them. There was a period during my travels when I encountered people I still don't completely understand. They were not frightening in the obvious way. That would have been easier, actually. There was something about them that felt like wrong. It's not evil, not exactly. Just wrong in a way I couldn't place. Their silence felt deliberate. Their eyes seemed like carrying the kind of exhaustion you would expect from someone who had seen things they shouldn't have survived. I remember leaving. I remember walking for a long time. I remember the feeling that something was following me, and I remember turning around and seeing nothing. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe isolation had started changing the way my mind interpreted the world. Maybe there are experiences the brain creates when pushed behind the limits. That's what science would probably tell me, and perhaps science is also right. But sometimes I still remember the sound. That's all I'll say about it. Some memories are better left without names, because once you give something a name, you'll make it ordinary. And I've learned that some things should remain unexplained. People sometimes ask why or what I'm running from. I don't know. Maybe nothing. Maybe it's everything. There was a time when I thought I needed to achieve something extraordinary, become someone famous, build something, be remembered forever. But the older I became, the less interested I became in being remembered by everyone. I started caring more about being honest with myself. Goals are strange. We spend years climbing towards something and then discover that the mountain was never the destination. It was the person we became while climbing it. Money can buy comfort, knowledge can buy understanding, power can buy opportunities and chances, but none of them can purchase another hour. Time is the only currency nobody can earn back. And death is the final accountant. It doesn't care how intelligent or smart you are, how beautiful, how rich, how powerful. It doesn't care about your followers on Instagram, your achievements, your regrets. Eventually, everything becomes quiet. I don't find that depressing. I find it clarifying. Death is not what makes life meaningless. Death is what prevents life from becoming an endless postponement. If you knew you had forever, would you ever begin? Would you ever say the words you've been afraid to say? Would you ever leave? Would you ever love? Would you ever forgive? Probably not. We need the ending, because without the ending, there's no urgency. I lost people, some through distance, some through time, some through choices, and some simply became strangers while we were still standing beside each other. That's another form of death nobody talks about. The death of a relationship, the death of a version of yourself, the death of a future you thought was guaranteed. You can mourn someone who is still alive. You can miss a person who lives like 3 streets away. You can love someone and know that loving them no longer means staying. That's something I learned the hard way. Something really hard to get. Sometimes letting go isn't weakness. Sometimes it's the last form of respect. Not every person is supposed to stay. Some people are reasons. Some people are seasons. Some are storms. Some are lessons. And some are just scars disguised as memories. Don't hate everyone who leaves you. Some departures are necessary. The door closing behind someone can be the same door that finally allows you to breathe. I don't believe solitude is automatically strength. Being alone doesn't make you superior. It doesn't make you wiser. It doesn't make you better than people who need company. Solitude simply removes the noise. And once the noise disappears, you have to confront whatever remains. That's why some people fear being alone. Not because silence is frightening or scary, because silence doesn't distract you from yourself. I've learned with time to live with mine. I walk alone. I eat alone. I travel alone the whole world. Sometimes I disappear for weeks or months. I watch the sun rise from over the mountains nobody photographs. I swim in seas where there's nothing around me but water. I sleep in places where the nearest light is the moon, literally. And sometimes, at night, I look at the stars and wonder how many other people are doing exactly the same thing. Probably more than I think. That's the irony. Even when you believe you're the only person in the world, you're probably sharing the same loneliness with the same thousands of kilometers away. Maybe that's what connects us. Not happiness, not success, not certainty, but the quiet knowledge that all of us are trying to understand what the hell we're doing here. I've stopped looking for perfect answers. I prefer better questions. Why do we love? Why do we fear death? Why do we remember certain moments and forget others? Why does loneliness hurt? Why does beauty sometimes makes us sad? Why does the human mind create meaning in a universe that never promised us any? I don't know. And I'm comfortable with that. There's something beautiful about saying, I don't know. It leaves the door open. Certainty closes doors. Curiosity keeps them alive. So I just read, I observe, I travel, I disappear, and then I return. And I continue. Not because I know where I'm going, because standing still for too long makes me forget that life is moving. There's a place I return to sometimes, a mountain far from the cities. No crowds, no notifications, no voices, just the wind, trees, cold air, and an enormous sky. I sit there for hours. Sometimes I write, sometimes I don't. Sometimes I think about the person I used to be, and I barely recognize him. Maybe that's what growth really is. Not becoming someone new, but becoming unfamiliar with the person you once accepted as yourself. I used to think darkness was something you escaped. Now I think darkness is something you learn to navigate. You don't have to become darkness. You simply have to understand where it lives. Because every person has a shadow. The question is whether you control it or whether it controls you. If there is one thing I've learned from traveling alone, it's this. You don't need to be understood by everyone. You don't need to explain every decision. You don't need to convince people that your life has a meaning. Some paths are invisible to everyone except the person walking them. Just walk away. Leave when you need to leave. Stay when something is worth staying for. Love without turning love into possession. Learn without becoming arrogant. Be alone without becoming bitter. And when life becomes dark, don't immediately run from the darkness. Sit with it. Listen. Too afraid to hear. Because sometimes the darkest nights are not there to destroy you. They are there to show how much of yourself can survive without the light. And perhaps that's why I keep traveling. Not to escape the world, not to find myself, but to disappear long enough to remember that I was never really lost. I was simply listening to the wind, to the sea, to the silence. Silence like a cancer. it grows. I also listen to the strange wind of my own mind. And somewhere between one mountain and another, between one country and the next, between the person I was and the person I haven't become yet, I realized something. We're all temporary. Every relationship, every city, everybody, every empire, every star, even the universe itself may have an ending. So perhaps the goal was never to last forever. Perhaps the goal was to be fully awake while we were here. To look at the world before it disappears. To love something knowing it can be lost. To walk into the unknown without demanding that it explain itself. And when the final night eventually arrives, when there are no more roads, no more mountains, no more oceans, no more places left to disappear into, I hope I can look back without wishing I had lived more safely. I hope I remember the cold nights, the long roads, the strangers whose names I forgot, the people I loved, the people I lost, the people that changed me, the moments I couldn't explain, the silence, especially the silence, because somewhere inside all of it, there was a life, my life. And for a brief moment, the universe allowed me to witness it. That's enough for now. The road is still here. The road is still there. And I'm still walking. Yeah, so this is what I wrote actually. It's been a tough year actually. Especially the last year. From the end of 2025 till now. It's just been different. My life went 180 degrees, you know. I escaped things I thought they were unescapable. I gained power. I gained, like, it was just hard. It was just hard. My mind is just collapsing right now. ممكن خاطرني عندي ساعتين نحكي بالانجلي. المهم I'm still in the middle of nowhere actually. So this is for myself. This is for my future self. Maybe in 2030 I'm gonna revisit this. So yeah. See you soon, old self.